Welcome back to the Freedom Podcast, and we are here with another episode of Freedom People, where we get to talk to people around Freedom Church that are connected in through our church and hear a bit of their story, hear a bit of what God's been doing through their life. And so it's a real pleasure to be able to have Meg Cooke on with me today. How you doing, Meg?
I'm very well, thanks. It's good to be here.
Come on, it's been all action in South Africa. We've been hearing about it across the church over these
Has.
last few weeks. You've had a crazy, what would you say, is it last 9 months?
Yeah, I would say that's a good summary. 9 months. It's been pretty mad. Very exciting. Lots of change, and lots of impact, but crazy.
Come on. So you've had this whole build up to relaunching the church, moving
Yeah.
from your established venue where you guys have been able to really be meeting from since the church started there in Cape Town. And you have then left that behind in January. I think was it your last one in January, wasn't it? And then you
hmm
relaunched
hmm
at the end of February in your new venue, a local school, and getting a heart and vision to be able to reach much more people in the city. Talk to us a bit about what these last few weeks have been like. You obviously had the launch on the 25th of September, but then you obviously had a couple of
Yeah.
weeks since then. What's it been like these last few weeks?
Yeah. Amazing, busy, at times stressful, but
Mm,
overall very, very good. No, it's been great. We the lead up to the launch was filled with a sense of excitement and nervousness because we were really just are really putting all of our eggs in one basket and going, let's just let's just
we're all
believe
in.
this. Yeah, we are. We're really all in here. We're throwing the finance in, we're throwing the energy in, we're throwing the prayer in, the vision. And so we were very expectant for God to move, but we were also filled with a sense of, please work. I really, I really hope this is going to work. And so it was with great joy and relief, I would say, on launch Sunday that we saw 340 people come in. We had over 30 responses to the gospel message. And so it was incredible. And I think what was
Wow.
interesting, though, was that we were, and, I don't say that lightly, that was, truly was amazing. I think we were perhaps equally as nervous for week two because we were just asking ourselves the question is, are they going to come back? Was that just a nice event? Was that, the wedding?
Yeah.
And then, is that anyone actually going to come back for the relationship, and to actually build? And so, um, we then saw loads more people come back the second week, and we just had our third Sunday and more people came back and more people gave their lives to Jesus. And excitingly, people then actually deciding to join Growth Track, which, as many people will know, is our sort of 3 week course, crucially looking at what the vision of the church is, who we are, but really importantly how people's own personal uniqueness can connect with the church. And so it's been really exciting to go through that journey, get to know people more,
Yeah.
and really see the impact of the church. I think I've been reminded once again of the power of the local church and just how many people are looking. You can get quite used to your week
Yeah.
in, week out, and then you meet people who have never experienced a healthy church community before, and you're reminded again, that's why you do what you do. So, yeah, it's been a really amazing season, and we're really excited to sort of keep building from here.
Come on, Meg. That is awesome. I know you obviously have the big launch, this huge moment where you have everything's comes together and you see it all come to life. And then you obviously then have the following weeks after that, where you, as you said, you almost see, oh, are they going to return? Are they going to come back? What's been these last 2 weeks since the launch? Is there been kind of a highlight for you at all, or something that's really stuck out to you that has encouraged you?
I think I've been really, really proud of our team. I think I've been
Mm,
very overwhelmed. Like, it's been amazing to meet new people and see God move in that way. But I look at people who give so much of their time, so much of their energy, sacrificially to because they believe in the power of the gospel and the power of the local church. And that's been quite overwhelming to me, is you don't have to do this. Like it's a complete choice, but it is because people are driven by that love and passion for others that they give up their evenings and their mornings, and all of that sort of stuff. And I think the other thing then is seeing people step up. As we grew, we needed more people to step up into positions of leadership and influence, and to volunteer for the first time. And I think seeing people say, yeah, do you know what, I think this is important enough that I'm going to move out of my comfort zone. I'm going to sacrifice my time, sacrifice my energy. But then in return, seeing what that does for people, which is,
Yes.
confidence, joy, and just feeling like they have equity in every single decision to follow Jesus. So
Come on.
that would be my highlight, is what our team has done, because it's been, I mean, it's been amazing. I'm still pretty blown away by what people did, and how they gave and how they continue to serve.
Yeah, it is an incredible thing to see. And I got to be there in January and meet some of your people, and they're
Yeah,
just fantastic. And so many amazing volunteers and people that are part of this church family. But obviously, something that's really important for us as Freedom Church across the world is we want to see people released into their purpose. We want to see people coming alive with
yeah,
who they are. And I think, like you said, that could be one of the most impacting things for us. It's not only, oh wow, it's great because we get to do so much more as building the church ourselves. It's actually seeing the body of Christ come alive, people finding their gift, finding their place, and
mm,
coming alive with it. Not just
yeah,
doing it because, oh, it's dutiful or a job needs doing,
hmm,
and I'll help out, but actually really passionately building the church and taking their place. It is a beautiful thing to see. I love seeing that.
it
It's
is.
awesome.
Yeah, it
So,
is
Meg,
amazing.
just rewinding then a bit. I mean, for anyone who's listening to this doesn't know you, you're obviously not South African. So we're going to come back to the beginning of some of your story, and it started out in Herefordshire,
It
where
did.
you were born and you grew up in Herefordshire. And just tell us a bit of your story, because you're not from a Christian family, are you?
No, I'm not. No, I became a Christian when I was 12. A friend who's
Wow.
actually in our Cheltenham campus, Jess Mussett, she invited me to her local youth group. And I started to go, enjoy the community, and then started to go to the Sunday services after a little while as well. And it was a small local church, so there was it was church. There was no cafe team, there was no gently easing into it. It was just full on worship, you know full on full on church. And so I was just observing for a long time, and just there enjoying the community. And then I think there was just one night in my bedroom where I just decided this made sense. I'd heard how to
Mm,
give your life to Jesus, because it was talked about at the youth group, and you kind of got like a little book when you joined, and I read that, and I think it was the Gospel of Mark, and so it's just talking through these various things. And so it was a very it was obviously the most significant moment of my life, but at the time it was a very unemotional kind of just, yep, okay, I think I should maybe pray this prayer, because I think this makes sense, and I think I'm experiencing the presence of God. And so made that decision. And really from then it was it was, I would say, quite an average church youth experience for the time, which was, I'd go to youth group, really love it. I'd go to church, I'd go to the youth summer camps, but the youth summer camps were the highlight, and that's when I'd be like, I'm on fire for God, it's amazing. And then you go back to your normal life. And I wasn't I wasn't a particularly rebellious child. I it just wasn't in my nature. But I just kind of lived a normal life, and prayed sometimes, and I guess wrestled with the things that all teenagers do. But feeling this sense of
yeah.
there's a higher standard, because I am a Christian, and walking through some of that stuff. So fast forward, then I was 16, and the church I was part of at the time there was just a few disagreements and things, and so I was looking for a new church, and the Freedom was being held on Sundays in my high school, and I think, yeah, no, this is true. The Freedom did our Christmas carol service, and so there was like a spoken word piece, and I think a couple of songs, and then at the end, um, who happens to be my husband, Josh, now, Josh at the time, he was 15, invited the whole school to church. I don't think he was supposed to do,
Only Josh
but
Cook. Only Josh
only
Cook.
Josh. And, you know, if anybody knows Josh, they'll know that he's would obviously do something like that, even if he was told not to. So invites everyone to church, and I think, sure, let's just give it a go, because I liked, you know, sort of the passion and the energy that I was seeing. And so
Oh,
went on a
it had
Sunday.
nothing to do with the young man that was asking. No, no, nothing to do with
Absolutely nothing.
that.
Not at
Just
all.
saying, you might have him now, and he happened to be the one saying, "No, you should come to my church." I mean, I don't
My
know.
intentions were very pure, very pure. So I came, came on Sunday, and it was Christmas. And I think you were one of my first conversations,
I
which I was
remember it, Meg.
probably,
Yeah,
you know, awkward 16-year-old, pretty, you know, pretty anxious, just trying to figure life out. And so, but I really loved it. And what I remember was seeing the passion and seeing I think seeing what I'd always wanted out of my life,
yes,
which was just
right.
this passion and energy and this vision, I
There
guess
was
I was responsible
vibrancy in the
for.
place, wasn't there? There was a lot of energy.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And that's what I saw at all my youth summer camps, and which is why that was always the highlight of my
Mm.
year. And I thought, oh gosh, I can't believe this actually exists in, normal church life. And so I was slightly slow to get involved. It was in my final year of high school, and I was very anxious about my exams and everything, and so it took a little while to get involved. But after a few months, started coming regularly, and just absolutely loved it. And I think bit by bit, I formed some really great friendships. I grew a lot in my faith. I had some great mentors. Had some great opportunities to go to conferences and volunteer and be part of random stuff, but it all helped in forming relationship and building my confidence. And actually, one of the conferences that I got to go to was not a Freedom Church conference. It was a conference held by another church. A group of women were going, and they invited me, and so I said yes. Only the night before to think, I don't know who these women are. I can't believe I'm going away for 3 nights with these strangers, but we're doing it now, so let's just go. And it was actually at that conference that I first heard about human trafficking, which is kind of what has stirred my sense
Right.
of calling and purpose. So it was from that point that I sort of first heard about it, and it sparked something in me. And so even in those early church days, for me, God was really planting something and growing something. And so, yeah, then I went to university. Whilst Josh and I got together, I went to university. Josh went and church planted in Uganda and then in Cambodia. He came back and we got married. I finished my degree. And then we took a slight
You
detour.
skipped out over that so quick. Your 17-year-old boyfriend moved to Kampala, Uganda,
He
and
did.
you did long-term relationship there. What was it like? It was 15 months or something.
Yeah, it was about 15 months of long distance.
That's a
Yeah, it
lot. That is a lot,
was
isn't
a
it?
lot. It was a lot. Yeah, I
And
remember when he
you
told me,
somehow
I
made it work.
thought, yeah, and it's so funny because I look back now and I just think, you were a child. Like, what? Why did you have so much confidence that your first real like long-term relationship you could make work over Skype?
That is
Skype at the time.
incredible.
I actually think it was so long ago that Skype was sort of like just being introduced. So it was even like phone calls like before that. And yeah, I don't know what gave us the confidence to think we'd make it work, but we had it. And it was funny because when I went to university, I had people saying to me like, "Oh, I miss my boyfriend so much. So I was in Cardiff University. He's in Swansea, and for anybody who doesn't know, Cardiff and Swansea are like an hour apart. And I was like, I really can't listen to this, and I'm really sorry for you, but you know my
I can't be
boyfriend.
doing with this. Sorry,
Yeah,
you're rubbing it
I
in.
know, but like you can visit on the weekends. I don't have that option. And yeah, it somehow it just worked. And I remember when he told me, because he he sort of took me into a oh sorry, I just lost a headphone. He took me into a room at church, and I was like, I literally said, Josh, you're not proposing, are you? Because I was like, we're 17 and we've been together
in
2 months.
in a kids' room at
What are you
church.
doing? I was like, please, this is not the way. And he was
You had
like,
no
you
faith in his
honestly,
romantic skills here at all. Is that I'm going to take you into a
honestly,
side room at church and
yeah,
propose?
I don't know what I was thinking. Because he was like, Meg, we're in a random room at church. There's a crisp packet on the table. I'm not going to propose. I was like, yeah,
So funny the
fair point.
details you remember.
Okay. Yeah, I know. So what do you need to tell me? And then he was like, oh, I've been asked and I really want to go on this team to Uganda. And at first I thought, oh, okay, a few months, that's fine. And then he said 12 months, which then subsequently turned into a little more. So I don't know, like it was obviously challenging. It was obviously challenging, but I do look back now and I think we had no option than to just become best friends. Like that
Yeah,
was all
right.
we could do is talk, and it was amazing, and it really forced us to then like deal with any hang-ups we had, insecurities and baggage, and we were young, but I think because all we could do was talk, you kind of were just like, well, you end up talking about stuff and praying through things, and we were by no means perfect, but I think it really helped our relationship doing that. And I think the other thing it really helped us do was both explore kind of who we were as sort of young adults, ourselves without each other before we then came back together. So I wouldn't wish long distance on anybody, but I look back and I think it was actually really great for us.
Come on, that's amazing. And I remember Josh had been back. I think maybe he was back for a quick trip home, and or maybe he just got back. I can't remember which one it was, but we were talking about this in January, and we were talking about it was amazing because we were hanging out. We were saying, "Wow, isn't it amazing all the things that you guys have been through and all the things that you've done?" And we were listing, going off to Kampala, etc. And I think Josh said, "Oh yeah, and Cambodia," and I was like, "Oh yeah, I forgot you went there." And you very quickly were like, Josh, you were the one that asked him to go. And obviously, this meeting was seared in your mind because we went and Josh, I don't know if he was just coming back for a visit, but we said, "Hey, Josh, would
Yeah,
you mind going out? Bit of experience. Would you mind going out
you've
and
done
just spending
something.
3 months out in Cambodia?" And that was like, oh my gosh, I've just got through 15 months. And now he's
Honestly,
being asked for three more in a different country.
Josh, I was mad that day. I was mad. I was like, no, man,
With the
we
bunch of
have done it.
carrots.
Yeah,
That
we
was the
have
pub
done
we
it.
were in.
It's nearly over. Wow, look at us. And then sat around a table eating dinner. Josh, we just think you should go to Cambodia. And I honestly just felt like saying, I don't. I don't think you should go
I can't
to
believe we did
Cambodia.
that now.
Why would he go to
Unbelievable.
Cambodia? He's just been in Uganda. But
You
anyway,
did you did, do amazing, you guys. And it's amazing how you guys got through it because that is really tough. Um, but quite incredible. Skype in its early days, always blipping out and freezing. Absolutely rubbish.
always. Oh yeah, it
Oh,
was it was tricky, and power outages in Uganda, and yeah, there were some hurdles to overcome with a young version of Skype, but we made it work. It
but
it did work, and
you
we got
made
married,
it.
and we're still married. So
And Josh came back. He became the youth pastor, and you guys did that together, really,
yeah,
didn't you? And
yeah,
led Zeal in our church in Hereford, and really, Josh led the way on crafting something as our reaching young people, and it was brilliant.
hmm
And you guys had an amazing fruitfulness of that. And then we released our kind of church planting vision 10-4,
hmm
and there was this call to go to Birmingham, and so you guys ended
hmm
up going to Birmingham in the UK and going and planting church there. And
yeah,
so you went on that journey. I remember you actually had a conviction around that, didn't you, Meg? That like God was calling you guys to go there.
Yeah, yeah, it was, and it came about because I'd felt the green light from God to pursue um, qualifying as a lawyer. So I just finished university. We moved back to Hereford for, I don't know, 9 months or so, and Vision comes out, and I had felt a strong sort of stop from God on, I don't want you to pursue anything right now. Just sort of be here and volunteer and all of that kind of stuff. And so I went through a process, and I ended up getting a job that would enable me to train and qualify. And at first I was like, well, it's fine because Birmingham's not, the job was in Birmingham, but Birmingham's not far. I will travel, and we will live in Hereford. And I actually felt really happy about that. Like I'd come to a place of going, this is great. We're really enjoying life. And then I just felt God speak to me, and I just felt this conviction of you need to move to Birmingham. The other conviction I'd had at a similar time was, you're also going to buy a house, and which was laughable at the time because we had about £3 in our savings account. Um, and I remember calling Josh. He was on a trip, Belgium, I think, Rotterdam. I can't remember, somewhere in Europe. And I called him and I said, Josh, I said, I know this is going to sound like I've got a vested interest. So I completely understand that this might not seem genuine, but I really feel like we need to move to Birmingham. And I know that makes no sense because we kind of made a decision within ourselves that we don't really want to be apart from our church. There's no church there. So I don't know. I don't know. Just pray about it because that's all I'm feeling right now. And I think Josh's initial reaction was, well, isn't this very convenient that you got a job and now you think we should move to Birmingham? But it was, what happened next was, I mean, it was just God really, where Josh came back and said, I think there might be something in this. Maybe we could plan a church. I don't know. We need to talk to somebody. And so I think I can't remember who we spoke to. We spoke to somebody, and then we had dinner, with Chris and Naomi at the time, and we said, look, I know this sounds really crazy, but we think we should move to Birmingham, and we've got no real sense as to why. They then reverted with, oh, that's great because we actually feel that God is calling you to Birmingham to plant a church. And our
Right.
jaws were on the floor. We were like, well, it's real, it's real, the things we've been feeling and sensing. And
That's
it,
amazing.
we kind of went into this meeting thinking they're going to go, no, 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 guys, that's maybe in the future, but not now. Like, this is where you are right now. And there was the green light, and then all of a sudden we were talking
Wow.
about planting a church and being the pastors of that church, and leading a team. And so it was a surprise to us, but it all sort of went from there. And we gathered a team, amazing team, moved to Birmingham. I was practicing as well as starting the church at the time, and it was an amazing experience to build in that city. We love Birmingham. We still love Birmingham. Um, so yeah, it was a very cool season of our lives.
That's awesome, Meg. And one of the things I think, Meg, that's so fascinating about you and your story is the parallel of how this kingdom cause was kept coming into your life again and
Mm.
again, just calling you to different places, shaping your relationship, you and Josh. Church planting has also been a huge part of your story. And are you still in your 20s? Have you just
No,
made it out of there? No?
I'm
Oh, I'm
nearly
sorry.
31.
Nearly, nearly 31. Okay.
Nearly.
Well,
I'm still
only
30.
still 30, and yet you've planted multiple churches, and
Mm.
and and the journey that you guys have been on is quite incredible, really. Like what God's done through you both. But what's been there the whole time as well is this picture of career, and I think that we're so in Freedom Church, especially through those years, early 2010s to mid 2015, so much about like, I mean, Josh didn't even finish sixth form. He was going church planting at 17. It's like, let's just go.
Yeah. Mm.
And I think that there was this in us as like, oh, to be all in for the kingdom is to just go and build the
Mm.
church in whatever way that that looks like. But actually, there was this parallel journey with you where God was always really right from the beginning talking to you about the purpose of your role, your job outside of church. Just talk to us a bit about how those two have meshed together, how that
Mm.
how that has been walking that out.
Yeah, yeah. It's I think it was certainly challenging in the early days. I because so going back to when I first had a real sense that sort of law, government policy would be a sort of an arching theme of my calling was back at this conference when I was 16 and I first hear about this kind of awful societal evil of human trafficking. And I remember thinking at the time, I've got to do something about this. Like I hadn't really created a framework yet of, I was still so young, so I hadn't created a framework of involvement in
Yeah.
church and career. And so at the time, all I knew was that I had a fire to go, this is horrendous. How is this happening in the world? I've got to do something. And at the time, it was very much like gonna save the world kind of vibe. It was very self-motivated and kind of selfish ambition, I would say, and some of that was just youth, and but some of it was also some of my character that God was going to hone over time. And so from that point then was my boyfriend, fiance, then husband was totally church. All he wanted to do was be a pastor, and that's what he's now doing. And I love that, but I always knew that although the local church would always be central to my life, that there was something outside of that God was calling me to. And so I had to really, it was a real lesson in going, what do you think God is saying despite the pressure that you feel around you? And I don't mean pressure in like a negative sense. I think there was just lots of exciting church stuff going on that I really could have done. But I just had this tug and this pull and this sense from God that it's not, and in fact, he said this to me when I was sort of 16, 17, it's not either or, it's both and so I had this sort of both and mentality to pursuing it, which was just because I'm pursuing something outside of church doesn't mean I love the church any less, doesn't mean that I can't give my time and my energy to the church, and doesn't mean that there won't be some seasons where it's all church or some seasons where it's more career than it is church. It just means that God has
Mm,
space for both in life.
it's really
I
good.
think I also got the sense at the time that there would be an element of in the sort of friendship groups I was in, or the community I was in, that there would be a sense of having to pioneer that journey, and not out of a sense of pride or like I'm just going to do this, but out of I can't deny what God is saying to me right now, and my primary duty above anything else is to listen to the voice of God with wise counsel, with encouragement from my friends and family. But that's what I have to go with. And so it was really then a case of going with the whispers of God in every
Right.
season.
Hmm.
I was a very anxious person by nature, and it's if there's a sinful default that I will go to, it is that to worry and to overplan and to overthink and to try and plan 10 years into the future. And so, although I had questions about, I don't quite know how my boyfriend, fiance, husband, who wants to do all church, and me, who actually thinks may work outside of the church, will build our lives together. But what I do know is that we've got the principle of following God's voice, serving people, having the local church at the center of our lives. So I've just got to trust that God has brought us together,
Yeah.
and He's going to work out the details of that. And He did. He really did. And I think
Amazing.
it became a journey that I got used to over time. At first, it was a little bit like, just it feels confusing and overwhelming. But it became a journey that I got used to, which was hear the whisper of God, figure it out, bring it to trusted people, trusted leaders in church, pray it through with them, talk about it with them, and as best you can, do what God says. And I think there were some really highlighted examples of that, such as Birmingham. Okay, well, I felt the release to go for this job, got the job. Feel like we should move to Birmingham. I don't have any of the answers to that, but through pursuing the journey, it happened. On the flip side, it also happened when it came to coming to Cape Town, because 4 years after Birmingham, we were presented with an opportunity and felt this sense of call to Cape Town. And that made no sense for my career, because I was like, I'm 2.5 years qualified now. I'm building my career. This should be when I'm building towards a peak in my career, really establishing myself, really building out who I am as a professional that I feel God's called me to be. But I feel like God is saying, leave it all here and move to Cape Town, where you've got none of the answers, and they will come,
Wow.
but you don't have anything right now. And so over that sort of 10 to 12 year course, I would probably summarize it as just following the whisper of God in each season, even when it doesn't
Yeah,
make
it's really
any
good.
human sense. So yeah, it's been a challenging journey, but also a really great journey, because I feel like I've been able to learn what it is to be fully pursuing what you feel like God has called you to do, whilst also really valuing and giving to the local church, because that's important to Jesus, and so
It's
it's got to
really
be
good.
important to me.
It doesn't have to be one or
Yeah,
another. It can be
yeah,
both.
absolutely,
I love
absolutely.
that,
And I
Meg.
think, yeah, go on.
I was just going to say, if for those of us that are, maybe not familiar really with what trafficking means or what that looks like in the world today, obviously you went into law, you studied at university,
Mm-hmm,
you were then working. Was it in Birmingham? You were working at a firm
mm-hmm,
there and getting experience in law. And then you've more specifically, I think, over the last few years, moved into specifically that field that you felt called to
mm-hmm,
as a teenager. What does that look like? What does trafficking mean for someone that
mm-hmm.
doesn't maybe is not familiar with that?
Yeah. So trafficking really, human trafficking really simply is the exploitation of people for their labor, for sex, or for their services. So it can look as something like somebody who is being forced to work in a job and has very low pay, or is working in really bad conditions, or it can look like somebody who has been tricked into going to a certain place and then being forced into sex work or domestic work. So there are a number of elements that make up the crime, but on a very simple sort of nutshell basis, it's the exploitation of people for those things.
Wow. And I imagine that you working in that field, there's some incredibly dark things that you have to kind of look in the face of. And I think for a lot of
Mm,
us, we prefer not to look at it because it's uncomfortable.
mm,
It makes us, feel sad or upset. How do you go about, Meg, dealing with things that are so dark and evil, and hearing some of
mm.
those stories that you've got, it's part of your job. You've got to get into the details of some of those things.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that, but then still, you know, go back to being a mum, a wife, go back to,
Mm,
leading
mm.
within the church?
Yeah. Yeah. I think what I've noticed over time in this field, because even before I was in working in anti-trafficking work, I was representing survivors of sexual abuse, and so there was
Right.
always sort of this common thread. And I think I recognized in people, in myself, that you tend to have one or two responses to that darkness. One is being totally overwhelmed and then paralyzed and thinking it's too big, it's too dark, I kind of don't want anything to do with it, or I can't do anything about it, the problem's too big. Or
Mm,
sort of
right.
breaking down the problem and looking at where these sort of pockets of hope are, and where people, the church, can play their part to actually address the problem. And so for me, I think in my work now, there is an element of I've had to create a little bit of separation in my mind to go, just because I can handle reading these things and looking at these things doesn't mean I don't care. It just means I've created a bit of a mental separation to enable myself to be effective at the work and not be totally overwhelmed by the emotion of it. And then I think the second thing as well is continuing to walk the journey, submit it to God, and talk about it with God, because I think no matter how long you've been in a certain field, there are still certain cases, certain stories that really shake you. And I think particularly since becoming a mum, you are far more acutely aware of the emotion involved in a child in exploitation, or a
Mm.
child going
Yeah.
missing,
Wow.
and it pulls on those vulnerabilities and that part of your heart. And so that is something that I have to continue to bring to God, because there are still times when I go, God, how on earth is this happening? How has this happened? Like, it is due to the failings of men, not men, the gender as in like humanity. It's due to
Yeah,
sin.
mankind. Yeah.
I know, yeah, I know big picture why this is happening, but God, this child, oh my gosh. And I think it's been a lesson in learning the heart of God, who isn't sitting there going, oh, I don't know, but is pouring his heart out for that one person, and is as angry and as frustrated as I am. And so there's a, well, in fact, even more. And so there is a being okay with just handling the big emotions of it and going, there are going to be times when you feel that, but there are also going to be times when you need to get to work. And I
Mm.
think when you are pursuing God's calling as best you can, there is a grace that God gives you to handle it. And that's what I would say of myself, is that I have a, when you, I think when you study law, when you
Mm.
become a lawyer, you learn a bit of a disposition around, this is work and this is home, because work can be stressful. But I think there is also undoubtedly a grace that comes on your life, where you are sort of supernaturally able to do things
Yeah.
that other people go, how can you do that? Because I think of other people in other fields. Um,
Right.
so yeah,
Right.
that's what I'd probably say to that.
Yeah. That's great, Meg. And one of the questions that came to mind for me is what we talked about, this parallel where you're in building the church. You've literally moved your life out to South Africa to build the kingdom there, to see this church established. It's a big. You don't do that unless you're absolutely passionate and called to it. But also,
Mm,
you feel called and to this world and to make a difference there. How has building the church, building the kingdom, rather than seeing them two separate things, how has it
mm.
informed, helped you go into that world of law or anti-human trafficking and make a difference there? How has that impacted it?
Yeah, yeah. I think early on in my journey, I settled within myself that if I'm doing it for God, it's all worship. So just because I
Amazing.
maybe there are going to be some times when I can't do all the things I want to do, I can't volunteer all the hours I want to volunteer, or I'm so caught up in something at work, or I don't know. If I am doing it with the intention of doing it for God, it is worship to him, and it is important, and it is building the kingdom. And so even if I can't see the direct impact, I'm a pretty impact driven person, and that's what's driven my career and even how I make certain decisions. So that there comes an element of trust of going, I'm in I'm in the library at 10 p.m. and I'm revising for a land law exam. I don't care about land law, but I know that it's part of this journey, that the
Yeah.
overarching thing, God is not, there's not the specific call of my life to go to the library at 10 p.m. and study land law, but it's part of this overarching theme of, you are called to this space, and for this season you are called to university to study, so you've got to make the most of it. And a verse that has always really driven me in that space is, do everything as if you're doing it to the Lord. And that really changes how you approach it, rather than
Yeah.
going, oh, this is totally separate to church, this is, to going, if God has led me here, then I better do it as if I'm doing it to the Lord, because
Mm.
it's important to Him, and
Yeah.
sometimes in those moments all you're learning is integrity and hard work, but that's part of the journey. Other times you don't realize the impact of what you're doing, and it comes out a few years later. So I think I just began to frame all of it as worship, and as building the kingdom. Building the kingdom is not just church. Building the kingdom is pursuing God's call for your life, both through your call to the local church and outside of the church in whatever capacity that might be. So yes, that really, I think, just informed it then. And I think what that does is that just gives you space to go, what could God do? Because you sort of remove the barriers then and go, well, it doesn't mean it just
Right.
has to happen in this little box. It doesn't happen in this little box. It just happens. The kingdom of God is so pervasive. It's in
Yeah, that's so
everything. It's
good.
in every
That's so
relationship.
true.
It's in
It doesn't, yeah,
every
fit into these neat lines.
exactly. And
Mm.
even if you are working in a job that you don't love and you want to get out of, it's still important to God that you do that with integrity and passion, even if
Brilliant.
all your job is earning an income to you. Well, it's the income God's given you, and this is how He's given it to you to earn. And so, yeah, I think when you frame it like that, you feel far more at ease with yeah, God, with being flexible, I think, with what God calls you to do.
Come on, Meg. And then just flipping that, how has it impacted you working in the world of law, anti-trafficking? How has that then informed maybe the way that you've built church, or the way, or what has it brought to that aspect of who you are?
Mm. Yeah, I think I think when you build outside of the church, you can get some really great skills that you're able to bring to the church. And I think
Yeah.
what we are all required to do is bring the best of ourselves to the local
Yeah,
church,
that's
because
great.
ultimately, whatever you're called to do, whether it's to be a banker in London or whether it's to work for a non-profit in Cape Town, you are there is nothing that trumps the gospel, or that
Right.
fixes things. That is the answer. Like the gospel is the answer to all of humanity's problems. And so if that is
Yeah.
right, then we need to make it a central thing in our lives to honor the church, which is the primary vehicle for that. Are there
Hmm.
other ways to share the gospel? And of course there are. There are tons of brilliant ministries and charities and people out there doing that. But God calls us to the church to bring the best of ourselves. And so I think it's helped me go from um, a very good position, which is, oh, like I'll just do anything. I'll go anywhere, and which is still the right posture to have, and it's still a posture I have. Two, I've actually got some skills to bring. I've got some thoughts to offer. When
Come
it
on.
comes to, because of the work I've been in, thoughts around things like safeguarding and even how
Yeah.
we structure some of our policies. And for some people that sounds so boring, but I know that's really important to church, and
Yeah.
people
Right.
it's not just your clever graphic designers and your marketers who can make a big splash in church. It's whatever you can bring, even if it's your work ethic, if it's your diligence,
Definitely.
you can bring that to the church, and the church will benefit, and people will benefit from you bringing that. So I think that's really helped me. It's helped inform my approach to church. Is even if your sort of your 9 to 5 feels primarily outside of the church. The church again is this pervasive thing that is in everything, and um, is outside of just the 4 walls of a Sunday. So, and we've got to treat it as such.
Come on. Absolutely brilliant. Meg, you've got such an inspiring story. And I just know that for people listening to this, hearing about what you do, and as well as building the church, will be enthused, I think, about their own journey and their own callings as well. So thanks so much for sharing this. Thanks so much for your time today. It was absolutely brilliant getting to talk with you. Say
Thanks,
hello to
Josh.
Joshy for
Pleasure
me.
to be here.
All right.
I will.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Freedom Podcast. We'll be back next week with another episode.